Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I know we're expecting a few more, but I will, get started so we can hear from Dr. Amy. I'm going to make a few quick announcements, and I'll try to make them, as quick as possible because I know everyone's here to hear from Melissa and Amy. So I'll hand it over after to Melissa, who is our Community Resource Director. So one just quick announcement is, for everybody that's come to this event, we are giving out a discount code to try the Lineron kit. So I will drop the code in the chat and send up a follow-up email, but it's January Social 20 for 20% off of our Lineron kit. So if anyone hasn't tried it yet, we would love for you to try it. We have also just this past week, we're super excited, launched our 2021 amputee survey. So the survey is designed to help understand some of the, experiences and challenges our community is having and to best come up with resources that help you. So I will drop that link actually right in here. And to say thank you to everybody, we are giving a discount as well. And also one lucky winner will win a $100 gift card to Amazon along with a free Lineron kit. So we would definitely appreciate everybody's feedback and to go on and fill out the survey. It doesn't take too long. I haven't timed it yet, but I think it's, 5 minutes of your time would be awesome. And then I think our last thing is, as many of you know, Melissa also runs Adaptively Abled, and she currently has a auction going on, which is awesome. So it's going on through Valentine's Day. So if anybody wants to support the amazing things she's doing, they should go check out her auction, which I will put the link in. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Melissa and Dr. Amy to get started.
Thank you. I am so excited. I have been a huge fan of Dr. Amy West since I learned about her while working at Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital. So Amy first pursued a career in film production and worked for organizations like MTV, and I'll let her elaborate a little bit more. And then she decided that she was going to go back to school and pursue a career in medicine. Not only did she just dive all in, she ended up going to one of the top medical schools in the country, to Harvard Medical School, and then did her residency at Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital in Boston. Then went on to do an internship at Maine Medical, and she's now back to her home state of New York, working at Northwell Health as a sports medicine physician and a physiatrist. Amy is an active individual in the CrossFit community, is a huge advocate for adaptive athletes. And I am so excited to let Amy share a little bit more about herself, her backstory, and really what inspired you to pursue a career in medicine and eventually physical rehabilitation and sports medicine in particular.
Oh, wow. Okay. So hello, everybody. So I've been an athlete my whole life. And initially I wanted to kind of work with athletes and, with, in that arena, and I was more on the entertainment side of it. So I was working in film production and, I always enjoyed being creative and sort of making things to teach people. And I was doing that through an entertainment lens. So I was working in television production for a few years. And then I actually got a job as a surgical videographer. So I was filming surgeries and making educational videos for surgeons. And I started hanging out in the hospital more, and I just realized that I felt I should sort of be doing more with myself. So I said, no, I always like school. So I decided to go back to school and look into this whole medicine thing. So that's kind of how I went from one thing to medicine. Specifically physiatry, how I found it. Like I said, I was always an athlete, and I knew I didn't necessarily want to be a surgeon. So I said, oh, how can I work in sports but not operate? That's how I found physiatry. It's sort of a bit of a well-kept secret, even in Boston, where we have, great Spalding Rehab, which is a great facility and one of the top, rehab facilities in the country. As far as the medical students getting exposed to it, it's sort of a bit of a secret. So I was in a interest group called the Lifestyle Medicine Interest Group, where we kind of look into, it was like other medical students who are interested in kind of treating root causes of disease rather than using like pills and those kinds of things to treat kind of the end symptoms, but looking sort of more into how to treat the root cause, looking through exercise, diet, things like that. And one of the person who ran that group happened to be a physiatrist, so she kind of introduced me to some of the sports medicine people, and that's kind of how I got started looking into physiatry. But what really kind of confirmed that experience was I was a medical student working at Spalding just after the Boston Marathon bombings. And we saw, when I was rotating through there, that's when many of the victims from that incident were being treated at Spalding. That's when I really got to work hands-on with many of whom were amputees, people with traumatic brain injuries, et cetera. So that was really an eye-opening experience, and really made me want to keep working in that field. So now I've sort of merged the two, working with those populations, but also bringing the sport and fitness side to it. And the two things go together quite well. So, physiatry is essentially the medical field of function. That's what we specialize in, is treating function and optimizing that. And there's no better way to do that than with exercise and functional fitness, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but that's how I ended up here.
That leads me right into my next question. So I wasn't exposed to CrossFit until after I became an amputee, and there were a few physicians that weren't necessarily in favor of CrossFit because sometimes you see some of the extreme negative effects of overuse or rhabdomyolysis, other consequences of extreme training, but there's so many benefits of functional fitness. I am definitely a huge advocate for it. Why are you as a physician a huge advocate for pursuing functional fitness and healthy lifestyle changes, especially for the adaptive community?
I think now we're seeing why, with COVID being what it is, it's having the most seriously negative effects on people who are not metabolically healthy, who are not physically active, and ultimately being able to optimize your health via, diet and exercise, is what will prevent further medical complications down the road. So, I think there's a lot of there's been some negative sort of press specifically surrounding CrossFit, and most of that comes from people who are very unfamiliar with it. CrossFit essentially is high intensity exercise using functional movements, and functional movements are things that we're doing every day anyway. So, for example, deadlifting, for example, everyone has to pick stuff off the floor. So a deadlift is pretty much that. It's just a matter of learning how to do it well and do it correctly. So there, something like functional capacity, which is, your ability to perform those functional movements. Optimizing functional capacity will prevent you from having further injury and disease down the road. So we've seen some, certainly at any extreme range of any kind of exercise, you will see injuries. I see tons of running injuries. I never tell people not to run, very, very rarely do. Certainly with CrossFit, I've seen many more benefits of it. People becoming healthier, more active, more socially engaged through it, than I do see negative effects. And that being said, the negative effects I see, I think if as a medical community, if our biggest problem was that people were exercising too much and hurting themselves, I think we'd be in a really fortunate situation. That's not what's in the hospital right now with COVID. It's not people who are over exercising. It's people who are not exercising for the most part. So, and then specifically when it comes to adaptive populations, I think, your ability to perform functional movements can be a life or death situation, right? So, or it could mean, gaining or losing independence. So, being able to train those movements and optimize those movements and do them well and do them safely, really needs to be a focus of any kind of exercise program, because for an adaptive population more than anybody, it's specifically extremely important and necessary, for independence and functional reasons.
So what drew me to CrossFit was the community aspect of it. And in a time where we are socially isolated and dealing with a community who kind of at baseline are a little bit more socially isolated, can you speak to the mental health benefits of being part of a fitness and lifestyle community?
Yeah, so, I mean, ultimately with a part of the reason that CrossFit has such positive effects and is effective is because there is a social aspect to it, meaning there are people there who, as an adult person, it's just hard to make friends. We're not like in class and stuff necessarily. So, it brings people from all kind of walks of life together in the same place. There's people to hold you accountable, to say, hey, where were you yesterday? We did this workout, where were you? As a physician, I can make recommendations, but it's really the habits, turning those recommendations into habits, which is what makes them effective. So, by joining a fitness community, you can make those changes in your life into a habit that you form. Also just, to see people, to interact with people, to, especially for an adaptive athlete who may not, necessarily see other people like them, by getting involved in an adaptive fitness community, you can learn from each other, learn how to do certain movements together. So super important, especially now, given, the situation being what it is, and that everyone has to kind of stay away from each other. At least having those resources available online and be able to connect with people that way, certainly something that is extremely valuable, especially now.
So this is a pretty big year for adaptive functional fitness and adaptive CrossFit in general. This will be the very first year that adaptive athletes will be on the same stage, competing alongside able-bodied individuals on the biggest fitness platform and stage on the planet. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm super excited. I know the community is, but you have been involved in the progression of kind of seeing this to fruition along the way. What has that experience been like for you? And what do you think are the benefits of this monumental kind of coming out moment for the adaptive community at the CrossFit Games?
It's great. I think to be recognized, the adaptive community be recognized, and also, given an opportunity to show off, if you will, the amazing things that people are doing. And then also, I think it's valuable. It's not just, the Logan Aldridges of the world who are, crushing everything, that there's everyday people who want to be involved in fitness and maybe up to this point didn't know the entry point or never saw somebody like them doing it. So, representation matters. And, being able to see someone doing something that you maybe didn't think was possible. So I think that's huge. It's important. And there's been a lot of work going into, how to make the rules and regulations and how to make the competition fair and, get everybody involved who wants to be involved. So, it's still an evolving process, but I think it'll be great. And I'm so excited to see the recognition. I think also beyond the CrossFit space, having other people who are involved in adaptive sport who don't necessarily know what CrossFit is or adaptive CrossFit is, see that and maybe it will start to register. Because I know, for example, there are a lot of people that even at Spalding who work in the Paralympics and who work in the adaptive sport space, but they have been somewhat, not necessarily into the adaptive CrossFit space or just unaware of it really. And, you know, one of the things about CrossFit and fitness, adaptive fitness prepares you to participate in the adaptive sport. So, you know, being able to do adaptive sailing is great if there's a boat and there's people to get you on the boat. But if you can't get yourself onto the boat because your triceps aren't strong enough to transfer you there, you know, that's an issue. So the adaptive CrossFit really kind of addresses that need to not just say, here's wheelchair basketball, but it's like, how do you have the endurance for wheelchair basketball? How do you have the strength to move yourself, you know, for 90 minutes in a wheelchair fast, you know, things like that, where I think now it's also a really great kind of display for people who are even in the adaptive sport world who just haven't really recognized or are aware of what adaptive CrossFit brings.
Yeah, I have several Paralympian friends, and they use CrossFit to cross-train, like you said, to prepare themselves and give themselves a competitive edge in their respective adaptive sport.
Right.
So with the adaptive community, we have a lot of body imbalances, and we are more prone to get compensation or overuse injuries. So what are your recommendations for this particular community in terms of training, but also training safely so that you're preserving your sound side or what you do still biologically have left to prevent injury, but also kind of knowing that line of when to push through pain and when not to, because I think that's always a concern for adaptive individuals. It's, if I'm feeling pain, when do I push through versus when do I hold back?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is connecting with somebody who's, you know, a trainer or a group of people who are familiar with your particular impairment, whatever that is, because there are, you know, trainers who are not familiar with, you know, either, you know, see a prosthesis and run because they are baffled by it, or they just treat it as if it's a, you know, regular leg essentially. And, you know, both of those things aren't correct. So, you know, if you're going to start a fitness program, you know, consulting with someone who is familiar and comfortable and aware of your body and how it moves. That being said, you know, as far as, you know, training on your own, as far as pain goes, you know, and this is for most things, but I say, you know, sharp pain, swelling, certainly in an amputee population, skin breakdown, those are all kind of red flag stop. Soreness is okay most of the time. I'll say that. You know, you want your, especially when you're training, you know, your muscles might feel sore. You might feel, you know, next day feel a little sore, but you shouldn't be, you know, debilitated to the point where you can't kind of function. You shouldn't have sharp pains that make you stop what you're doing. And obviously you see swelling, bruising, and then skin, particularly any kind of open skin, like that's a no, that's a stop. So I think that's important, certainly with, you know, any kind of prosthesis use, you know, having the right, you know, discussing that with your prosthetist as far as like, these are the kinds of things I want to do, because, you know, certain kinds of prosthesis don't necessarily, you know, as far as like loading and stuff, you have to be a little bit careful. Range of motion of the joints, you have to be a little bit careful about, you know, the technical kind of the weight that it can handle. And then adjusting range of motion is huge, because part of it too is like you don't necessarily want to just only train one side, even though the other side may be impaired. There are ways to train it that can be done. So you need to also continue to work on strengthening the other side as well. So that's important too. And that involves some, you know, depending on specifically on what it is, you know, would try some specialty kind of, you know, adjusting, but certainly you want to train both sides if you can. If there's anything to train on that side, you want to continue training it and exploring the range of motion. Might take some adjustment. And certainly I'd recommend, if you are interested in learning more about it, even for yourself or for other people, the guys at the Adaptive Training Academy, they have some really cool stuff on their website. They have a whole training course, but they have tips and tricks and stuff like that as far as adjusting, if you're lifting and you have a lower extremity prosthesis, lifting the ground up a little bit so that you're able to get that full range of motion, the ankle, things like that. So yeah, so there are resources available, and certainly looking into those too.
Great. Another question I have is your opinion on the importance of working on active range of motion, incorporating other lifestyle medicine, mindfulness, yoga, meditation into one's fitness regime, and kind of the importance of active recovery. I didn't really recognize how important it was until I was an adaptive athlete. So can you speak to lifestyle medicine, holistic health, and active recovery?
Yeah, so certainly your physical well-being and your kind of mental, emotional well-being, they're all kind of tied together. So certainly something like sleep, super important. You really can't out-train bad sleep or short amounts of sleep. You need to, that's really important. Nutrition, you cannot out-train a bad diet, cannot do it. So, you will see gains up to a point, but, definitely, optimizing nutrition, and that's a whole, separate subject. But at the very baseline, processed foods, extra sugar, things like that, even if you eliminate those two things out of your diet, that's a huge amount of, you'll see improvement just from that alone. And then, mindfulness, certain things like that, I think are very helpful, especially, I see people, who carry a lot of tension, for example, in their shoulders. So, they come in, they're all like tensed up and tight, and, I can treat that. Sometimes I do like trigger point injections in the neck. I do give them muscle relaxers for that. But often what can be really helpful is just taking some time for them to relax, which is easier said than done, but not unimportant. Similarly with, pain receptors and pain treatment, there are studies that have shown that, certainly people with higher levels of stress and anxiety experience pain differently, have more pain, it takes longer to go away, things like that. So mindfulness has been an effective tool in that, and, meditation, that kind of thing. So I'm all for that stuff. I think it's certainly important, and definitely something that should be, can't be ignored for the physical stuff. It goes hand in hand.
So you're a very busy physician, but you are also a competitive adaptive athlete. You are a public speaker. You've had multiple podcasts. So what I find a lot is a lot of us are trying to juggle a lot of things, and sometimes it's difficult to find balance. So in your busy life, how do you find balance, and what tips and tricks do you have for adaptive individuals to reestablish balance in their own lives?
Well, it's not easy all the time, but so I mean, I think for me, I always prioritize. I set things in my mind that I prioritize. So for me, I try to go to the gym every day, or most days, regardless. If I have to get up a little early to do it, if I have to put off something else to do it, I do it, because for me, mentally, it makes me feel better. Physically, it makes me feel better, and it's important for me to do. So, you will always find an excuse not to do something. It's very easy to do that. It's very easy to say, I'll do it tomorrow, or I don't have enough time, or, and sometimes that's legit. We have busy lives, we have things to do. But for me, I make that part of my day. I make that part of things I actively seek out to do, even if it requires, some juggling. And, so for example, like I average going up to 4 different CrossFit gyms in a week, depending on where I am and where my office hours are and whatever. And because I'll find a way to do it though, regardless of where I am. That's what works for me. But I think not prioritizing your fitness will catch up to you. So that's an issue. If you don't pay attention to it now, you will be forced to pay attention to it later. So, even though, you find the time. If you don't have the time, find the time, because otherwise you'll be paying for it later. I mean, that's just the truth. So, pay into your fitness now so you don't attention to your sickness later, because that's what's going to happen. And finding time, and also, sometimes also money is a challenge too. And and again, it's priority with spending, and I always, people say, oh, gym, it's expensive, and it's like, aren't you worth it? I think your body's worth it. That's really like that's what's carrying you through the day. Like, if you're not going to invest money in that, do you need that TV or whatever it is? You look how much you spend on cable a month, or look how much you spend at Starbucks a month, or whatever. And you can pull together something. You can make something happen in most cases if you think about it a little bit. So, it's priorities. It's setting your priorities for yourself, and what you want to do. But as far as like the fitness part of it, it's going to catch up to you either way. So, prioritizing that, at least as one of your top priorities, I think is a smart idea.
When I wasn't working remote, I had to schedule my fitness in. So I used to go to the 5:30 a.m. class because there's nothing on the planet that is an excuse at 5:30 a.m. except for myself. There's no traffic. I'm not behind in my day. So I can't agree with you more. Like, making that appointment and that investment in yourself and making it a priority.
So, and that's where the community comes in too. Yeah, because getting up to like go do something by yourself in the morning is sometimes difficult. But if you're like, oh, I'll get up and I'll see that person and I'll check in, and they're going to ask if I wasn't there, so I'll go. Having that extra kind of motivation really can help.
What advice do you have for somebody that is just starting their limb loss journey and maybe they're a little intimidated to show up at a CrossFit gym? What tips and tricks do you have for that individual to kind of build up their self-confidence, to take that first step to reach out and to show up, and then to actually continue to incorporate that as a practice in their own life?
Yeah, well, I'd say first of all that, the kind of the beauty of CrossFit is that it ranges as far as, everything's scalable. So even if you walk in and you see people doing like these crazy things, it's like, that's not necessarily what you will be doing day one. You might get there actually, but what's great about CrossFit is that everybody can do it. Everyone can do it at the same time in the same place. It just looks a little bit different. So, that's also the beauty of it, is that, when you step into a CrossFit gym and you want to be part of it, they'll find a way for you to be part of it. You don't have to go to a special class for people with limb loss. You just go to a CrossFit and they'll find you things to do. They'll find a way for you to do the same thing as everybody else. It might look a little different, might be altered somewhat, but that's the whole point, is that it's a very inclusive sport. It's probably the most inclusive of sports. So I'd say one is know that it's going to be weird at first, maybe just feel different. You might be intimidated walking into a place, full of people like doing pull-ups and stuff, but know that it's you can do it too. I think that's huge. Also, just essentially, like, don't give up. I think it's easy to, you do, even if you go to one gym and it's maybe you don't like the vibe there or whatever, there's so many gyms. It's like same thing like with doctors, people go to doctor and the person's terrible and they say, well, you don't like swear off all medicine. You just say, well, I think I just need to find someone else who's better for me. And that's what CrossFit is too. There's different vibes, different times of the day. There's different people there. There's different coaches. So sometimes it's a matter of finding the right fit and feeling comfortable in that. Know that people are cheering you on. I think that's also really a nice setting, is that the person who finishes last gets the loudest applause. People are really rally around you and they want to see you do well. And for anyone who's feeling maybe a little intimidated or like, oh, maybe I can't do this. It's like, you've already taken such a big step by even wanting to go in there that so many people are afraid to do. So the fact that you've even gotten that far is huge. So, you're trying to make yourself better and better able to do things that you need to do, and that should be applauded. So don't let the intimidation kind of scare you off. And then also, there are these communities of adaptive CrossFitters, like your group and Adaptive Training Academy and stuff, that can connect you with somebody in your area that might have some specialty in what you're doing. If you're doing something and it doesn't feel right, doesn't feel comfortable, be vocal about that. But then also, you may need to or want to seek out somebody who's got some extra training, some extra specialty training and working with people with limb loss. So that's also a community that's easy to tap into.
So you had touched on it for a brief moment, but sometimes fitness can be cost prohibitive, but there are so many organizations out there right now, especially because organizations have gone virtual, that are offering free community workouts. Literally, you could go on the internet and you could find a workout any time of the day, all different styles. And there's also grants. There are grants available through the Challenge Athlete Foundation that could help defer training and coaching fees for individuals. So there's always resources out there. If anybody's thinking of getting involved in adaptive fitness, please reach out to us. We're trying to build up the community resources at the Liner Wand and through my organization and other organizations. So please reach out. So this has been a difficult time because a lot of gyms have closed. How have you personally stayed active, and what tips and tricks do you have for individuals who are at home and may have minimal equipment, but still want to continue to work on their fitness?
Yeah. So, in New York, we were shut down for, probably through the summer into maybe September-ish. So I started essentially working out in my backyard, my parents' backyard with, actually I took my staff that works with me here, and most of them have never CrossFitted before. And I started just putting together different WODs. Most of them, we didn't have a lot of equipment. So, body weight movements, especially when you're starting out, can certainly be enough to get you sweaty. So that's what I was doing for a long period of time. Now that things have started to open up again here, it's been easier to kind of access, workouts and things like that. But, I had to be creative for a long period of time. And that made me realize all the things that can be done without any equipment. So body weight movements, squatting, push-ups, sit-ups, just start burpees, for example. Those are all things that you can do and change the amount, the time period, the rep scheme in many different permutations to make it, something challenging. And then, weighted objects, I think, something like a soup can or a heavy jug of water or something like that can be used as, a weight device to carry to one place to the next. Also mimics real life better anyway. So, so there are creative ways to do it. And certainly there are plenty of now, especially online workouts that involve no equipment. This year, the CrossFit Open is having a whole separate no equipment part. So it's definitely accessible now, and people are thinking about this more and more. So, and you got to start somewhere. So even if it's just doing some couch squats or something like that, up and down off your couch, something, it's a place to start. Grabbing a broomstick, doing some stuff with that. So there are a lot of ways to kind of to change it up now, and there are tons of online things that can help with that.
So I feel like 2020 has really forced so many organizations and individuals to leap so far outside their comfort zone and go virtual. What are some of the benefits that you've seen in the collaboration that has stemmed from everybody going virtual? And for your particular patient population in the adaptive community in general?
As far as virtual, what's made it nice is that, you know, you can participate from wherever you are. So you don't have to be in the same state, you know, bringing people together who are all over the place. With virtual activities, also now there's kind of no excuse for not doing it. You know, we've had patients, for example, who want to start physical therapy, and then they say, I don't really want to go in and I can't get a ride. And we're like, okay, well, now you can just sign on your computer and you can do it in your house. So, you know, now it's really taken out that excuse part of it, especially with these, like, you know, on-demand kind of online things. It's like you literally just do it whenever you want. It's there all the time. So, you know, so it's cutting down the excuse model a little bit. So I think that's been a good way to get people involved, especially, you know, with adaptive athletes in particular. You know, transportation can be an issue. So so now that kind of cuts that out a little bit. So that's what I've seen as far as, you know, it being different, but in some ways more beneficial.
I agree. So I know that many of my group members in the Linerwong community have been so excited to have you join us. So I want to make sure that we leave enough time for all the questions that everybody has been writing down and thinking about over the last few days. But okay. Amy, unbelievable presentation. It is always a pleasure to have you join us. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and you've been a huge champion in the adaptive community. So thank you so much for all that you do to help serve our community.
You're welcome. Hoping to keep doing that. So
yeah. So without further ado, if there's any questions, just so we could control background noise, if people could either raise your virtual hand or raise your hand if tech is still a challenge. I know for me, it still is a few months into Zooms and COVID. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking out loud, please type your question into the chat. So any questions?
So yes, physiatry is kind of a new word for me, and I really kind of had to go and look it up. So my question is, it was very interesting to find out what you do. So one of my questions is, how do I know that I need one? Or flip the coin, how do you find patients? How does that work in the community with the other kinds of practice that are around?
What state are you in?
I'm in New Hampshire, close to Boston.
Oh, okay. So physiatry is, so it has a few different names. So physical medicine and rehabilitation is sort of the full name of the field. It can go by physiatry, depending on the part of the country, it's called physiatry. They say it a little differently. So how do you know you need one? So as, you know, someone who's on this call, I would say you probably do. So, you know, unfortunately, because we're not a huge field, we're not necessarily in every state. You know, there aren't many of us in every state necessarily. So in Boston, there's a ton. Whereas in other states, like in New Hampshire, I'm not familiar with, you know, I think there's some people from Boston who've kind of leaked out that way, but I'm not sure, you know, there's no like necessarily like big like hub of physiatry in that state. So, you know, what we do is we optimize function. So our goal as physicians is we manage the physical manifestations of disease processes, meaning we don't, you know, we treat the physical effects of a disease, whatever that is. So whether that's, you know, like for example, someone with a spinal cord injury, we're not operating on the spine and fixing that spinal cord pathology, but we manage all the things related to that. So you know, the wheelchair prescription, the bowel and bladder management, the spasticity, et cetera. Similarly with an amputee population, we're working with the prosthetist to look at the different kinds of prostheses, the liners, the skin management, the pain associated with it, things like that, managing your physical therapy, stuff like that. So often, you know, certainly like in Boston, for example, people who are new amputees are often, you know, kind of funneled into the physiatry system for kind of management of those things going forward. If you're, you know, as someone who wasn't necessarily, you know, plugged into that, you know, I think it's a good idea to sort of seek that out, just to, even if to have that, you know, a physiatrist kind of in your back pocket should you have any issues going forward.
So quick follow-up, how do you find patients? Because it would have been really nice if one had found me after my accident. So, I mean, I didn't even know physiatry existed until a couple months ago. So I'm just curious how those inroads are working, because I'm sure it's a process.
Yeah, so it varies. So, you know, often the gateway to us are the surgeons who treat, you know, unless there's someone who knows about physiatry and seeks it out, which is rare. Often the inroads to our profession are the surgeons who manage the acute problem and then are saying, okay, well, I've operated on that and you figure it out. That's kind of usually the next thing. So, you know, certainly a lot of like people who are performing amputations or spine surgeons or even like orthopedic surgeons. I'm a sports medicine specialist, so I work a lot with orthopedic surgery, and I see a lot of their non-operative issues. But we're sort of usually work kind of in parallel to a surgeon, or kind of take over where the surgeon kind of leaves off. So that's usually how patients find me, is through I technically work for an orthopedic surgery department, actually myself, but you know, so we're usually kind of attached to work in parallel with surgeons usually, or a trauma center. You know, a lot of our patients are kind of some post trauma or post prolonged illness. For example, a lot of us are now working with post-COVID patients, you know, who have a lot of musculoskeletal issues following prolonged hospitalization and complications from respiratory disease and stuff like that. So, you know, we work in the acute rehab hospitals, so, you know, inpatient hospital rehab settings, but then, you know, there are people outpatient associated with that who are kind of working in parallel with them.
Great question, Beth. I don't think many of us knew what a physiatrist was until we were members of this community. So I think Glenn had his virtual hand up next.
Yes, hi. Yes, I'm one of those that didn't know about physiatrist until I was in a pretty bad way. And actually, it was the physiatrist after working with one of Boston's leading orthopedic surgeons that wanted to do a bunch of things, limb salvage related, that I declined, that I finally got shuffled off to the physiatrist with a comment that I'd be back in 6 months begging for the surgery. It was actually the physiatrist that ran me through a couple months of PT. Pretty intensive PT, and ultimately with me came to the decision I'd be better off, you know, with a prosthetic in terms of activity levels and what I could do. So I really wish I'd learned or known about physiatrists 10, 15 years before, when I started accumulating all these injuries that I, you know, quite stopped recovering from. But my question is to a different point, is relative merits of more intensive cardiovascular exercise, like you might get from walking, hiking, biking, running, skiing. I see Johnny V joined us. He's got me interested in skiing again. Versus my experience with things like CrossFit, weight and gym training, as I rarely get my heart rate elevated much. It'll elevate a little, obviously, if you're picking up weight and putting it down. You'll get, if you're healthy, I assume. But, you know, are there relative benefits? Is it you know, do as much of both as you can, or?
Yeah, so I think so by definition, CrossFit is functional movements performed at high intensity. So I think that's kind of where the disconnect is. So certainly, like, there is like weightlifting, which, you know, if you're like either at the gym lifting weights or on machines or whatever that looks like, which is not high intensity and will not raise your heart rate. It has its benefits unto itself, but does not necessarily raise the heart rate. Whereas CrossFit, essentially those movements are done quickly or intensely to raise your heart rate. So along with things like running or rowing or biking or whatever, in combination with that. So in a CrossFit setting, you certainly should get your heart rate elevated. And actually, the goal is that it's a shorter workout at a higher intensity. And actually those kinds of workouts have been shown to have more effect than, you know, running or biking at a moderate pace for hours. It's more time effective. It's more just physically effective to do those actually shorter, higher intensity intervals rather than prolonged like endurance sports hours on end. Also, especially with like endurance activities, often those can lead to a lot of chronic kind of overuse injuries because you're doing the same motion and the same plane of motion for a very long period of time. So so there's a bit of a delineation between CrossFit and like weightlifting, but shorter, more intense stuff in general, better.
Thank you.
Great question. I think Kyle had a question, and then Jody's hand was up next.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Amy, appreciate this a ton. As someone that is dove straight into the fitness community immediately after surgery, it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me. But one thing that I found the challenge with is if you live in a place like New Mexico, similar to like New Hampshire, a lot of your instructors are not familiar in how to help an amputee. For me, I think some people that are active, my physical therapist couldn't push me enough. And so I wasn't getting the development ideas. I went straight to the gym, and my trainer just was like, I am going to push you as much as I can. And but I'm not familiar with, you know, for me having above knee amputation, I didn't know right away. How do I work my quad? How do I work my hamstring? How do I work certain things? Are there places, or especially in the CrossFit community now, that is a place for an instructor to go to get training or get information on how do they help me or other athletes?
So I mean, the people that I'm most familiar with are the Adaptive Training Academy, who is led by two amputees, one upper limb and one lower limb salvage situation. But they actually they used to travel and do seminars for coaches to learn how to train adaptive athletes. And now they do a lot of online stuff, but they are very knowledgeable. I've actually worked with them to help kind of formulate some of their training material. And they are very knowledgeable. Their goal is to educate coaches and healthcare professionals and even people who even like someone like yourself who just wants to learn about yourself and how to adapt things for yourself can benefit from their stuff as well. So I think they're great. I know their stuff the best. So that's why I'm saying that. But there are other online communities that certainly provide instruction and help with that. But I think those guys for sure, especially when it comes to like CrossFit training and fitness training, those guys really have put a lot of time and energy and effort into making material for the adaptive community and anyone interested in learning more about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, no problem.
Question, Kyle. I did their live class, and I'm actually enrolled in a virtual cohort right now. So if you're interested as an adaptive athlete to learn how your body moves, and two, if you have any intention of ever wanting to work with adaptive athletes in the future, it's a fantastic class for an adaptive individual to attend for themselves, but also to be able to pay it forward down the line. Some of the other organizations are Crossroads Adaptive Athletic Alliance. There's also the Adaptive Training Foundation, but the Adaptive Training Academy really has a scientifically, medically based curriculum and is a really well-run program. And a little teaser to next month's community social, we will be having some of the founders, so Logan Aldrich, possibly Alex Zirkenbeck, and some other adaptive athletes come on for an adaptive CrossFit panel to kind of talk about the upcoming CrossFit Open in the new adaptive division. So definitely tune in for that, and you'll be able to speak to the experts themselves directly. But great question,
I interviewed Alec and Logan on a podcast that I do called Docs in the Box. And we interviewed them, and they kind of told us how they sort of transition. Yeah, they talk about how they sort of transition from the kind of in-person stuff to the online stuff and what they offer and stuff. So you can check that out too.
Amy, could you put that in the chat for us? Is there a link?
Sure. Once I figure out how to do that, I will.
Okay.
I'm on my
Or
phone,
we'll
so I'm not
have
sure
Allie
how...
or Liz look it up and put it in
Yeah.
for people to take a look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
I think Jody had a question next.
Yes, I have kind of a two-part question.
Mhm.
I've had, I can never say the word physiatrist,
Mhm.
ever since I've had my amputation, and they've been wonderful. I'm just wondering, is it kind of normal? Like you're with orthopedic as well.
Mhm.
And I know some have been with pain management as well. Is that like a normal thing?
Yes. So we get kind of spread out often. So in places where, so our field is very broad. So that's part of the reason why people kind of don't know what we do, because, you know, certain people, for example, do a lot of like spine and spine injections. So they're kind of housed in one part. Myself, I do a lot of sports and sports injuries. So I'm under the orthopedics. Some people do a lot, like the spine injections, often those are pain management. They get put inside of pain management. And then there are sort of general physiatrists who work more with, you know, people with physical impairments. So, and sometimes if there aren't enough of us, then they kind of shove us in other departments. So it's not uncommon that we are sort of part of another department. So we kind of get, and sometimes it's just political and stuff, but like we get kind of, because there aren't that many of us in many places, we kind of get put in other places. So for example, in my health system, we have a physiatry department. There's myself, who's actually hired by the Department of Orthopedics. And then there's another person who works in kind of pain management, who's actually part of the Department of Neurosurgery, but she's a physiatrist. So we get kind of spread out and we have different, slightly different roles. So yeah, it's a pretty common thing.
I never knew that until I just moved to Las Vegas from St. Louis, Missouri. And in St. Louis, they were just physiatrists.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I've gotten here, it's been physiatrist and pain management. And now you're orthopedic.
Yeah, so like our training is all like physiatry training. It's just sort of like what they classify us under, essentially, or like what our subspecialty is. But we all have the same kind of baseline training, and then the subspecialty thereafter is usually sometimes how we get divided.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Judy.
Okay, the first thing is shut the mute button off, right? Hi, Amy. I have actually met you at Spalding. I'm a peer visitor with the coalition, and so nice to see you.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
So I am probably textbook. I'm a 47-year veteran as an amputee. Above left leg above knee, motorcycle accident. And through my journey, racer, skier, golfer, big into sports all through the years. Fast forward to about 6 years ago. Overuse, right leg, knee, bulbous, arthritis, had a knee replacement, total knee replacement. So came through that great, and started having pain in my right side hip. Go to the orthopedic doctor. Cortisone shots, and nothing was helping, and the pain was excruciating. So didn't know about your side of the medicine. And then fast forward to about 1.5 years. I've known Melissa now for about 7 years. And I joined her physical fitness program, was one of the first amputees in her pilot program. I can't tell you the results. Huge, huge, huge. And now she's my personal trainer. All my pain is gone. I work out regularly with her every week. I can't tell you how good that is for me. So it's great to see your field here in Boston, because there is such a huge need for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's, and that's the goal, what you're describing, is exactly what, the hope is. So, that's why when I hear people say, like, don't do CrossFit, it's dangerous. I say, people who say that don't understand what they're talking about.
Oh, I got such a great result out of it. The squats, the lifting, that deep motion that you don't get just walking around as an amputee every day. Huge results. So great.
Awesome.
Great.
She is squatting again, and I am so proud.
Yeah, keep it up. That's awesome. Nice.
Any other questions for Amy before we let her get back to the clinic? Because I'm sure she gave up her lunch hour to join us here today.
Also, another resource for everybody, I would say, is the VA hospitals. A lot of them have sort of, there are a lot of veteran amputees who are, involved in the CrossFit community in some way. So, maybe connecting with some people that way might be a good inroad if you don't know of any in your area.
Just a real quick comment. I am a left below the knee with many other comorbidalities. Did I say that right? I never say that. And I do have an appointment next week with two of my doctors, and I can assure you that I'm going to be asking them to see one of you. So thank you very much for that, because I think it will be very helpful for me. So I would never have thought of doing that if I hadn't showed up today. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad to hear that.
Same quick comment. Thanks for coming and talking to us today and all the very good information. Where do you practice now?
So I'm in New York. I'm in part of the Northwell Health System.
Okay. New York area?
New York yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not too bad. We're in Boston.
Boston misses you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I was in Boston for a long time. Thank you.
Yeah. So Amy, it is always a pleasure. We always learn so much. I really want to thank you for taking a moment out of your busy schedule to come and join us and help educate us on the power of movement and just staying fit and active and incorporating a healthy lifestyle. We're huge fans. We love to follow your work on Instagram, and we hope to collaborate again with you soon.
Hopefully more to come. So we'll.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody else for joining.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.